when they had pushed the anesthesia that my husband's heart stopped. As that door opened, I saw my husband's lifeless body, and I just yell his name as loud as I can. I'm Kevin. My husband's heart started beating again.
I'm Susan Goss, and as a seasoned therapist of more than 15 years, I'm honored to have had the opportunity to gain so much wisdom from so many people and love passing that knowledge on to others. So join me and some of my favorite friends as we share some tangible truths with you.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Tangible Truth Podcast. I'm Susan, and with me again is Natalie, and I'm so thrilled that she's joining us in November. November, we've decided to do the month of miracles. I love it.
It's a good topic.
It's a great topic. It's a month of Thanksgiving, and why not do a month of miracles? And you have got a magnificent, one of the best stories of miracles I have ever heard. It is so, well, it's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
Let's just say it like it is. So again, Natalie was on with us last month, actually the last episode of October. So listeners, you've got to go back and hear about Natalie's bio and what she does and actually listen to the whole month of October. But anyway, Natalie is great, and we had a great episode last week. But this is about Natalie and a miracle, and I want Natalie to just take over.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for having me back on your podcast. We had such a great time last time we spoke, and this is definitely a little bit different of a topic, but no less lighter.
No,
but
tell
also
them your
just
name again.
Oh, yes, this is Natalie Tibbs with the Children and Family Advocacy Center.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a pleasure to be back and to get to talk about God is not done doing miracles.
No, he is not. And
He's still in that business.
Yeah.
Just not even 2 years ago, almost 2 years, December 9th, my husband went in for just a routine hernia procedure. It is a procedure that he's had before. He's had multiple more serious surgeries than that hernia repair. So we didn't think anything different of this day. We had just dropped off the kids at school. I had gone back to meet him at the hospital. And within 5 minutes of them taking my husband back for his procedure, there was an intercom announcement of a code blue. And the receptionist said, code blue OR2. Code blue OR2. And I had looked at how many other individuals were in the waiting room and trying to gauge, just how many patients would be back there. And there was another gentleman who was by himself, like I was, and he and I exchanged a few glances at each other, and there was another family in there. And so that was awkward. And then at that point, a doctor had come out, but then he went to speak to another family, and their conversation definitely wasn't heavy. And I was on the phone with my husband's brother. And then shortly after that, 3 nurses walked out of the OR, and we knew that whatever was about to come out of their mouth, we were about to find out whose family was being impacted by that trauma in the OR room. And unfortunately, they said my name. And they said, Natalie Tibbs, may we speak with you? And I just remember slowly shutting my laptop. I told my brother-in-law, I need to go. There's something wrong. But then in that moment of just, if I run out that door, will that change the trajectory of what it is? And, how do I sit here in denial, and will it erase anything that's potentially going on? And I just remember slowly walking towards the nurses, and I could see the look on one of their faces, and I just crumbled to the floor at that moment. I just said, no, please don't tell me. Please don't tell me. And they scooped me into the back room, into one of their offices, and I'm just on the floor, just sobbing. They hadn't even been able to tell me what was going on. I know I have a medical background, and they let me know that when they went back there and when they had pushed the anesthesia, that my husband's heart stopped beating. And they were actively working CPR, but things weren't looking very good. And they asked me, who do you want us to call? Susan, in that moment,
Oh.
like, what do you mean? Who do you call?
Mhm.
They said, well, can we call, who's your person? I'm like, you have my person.
Yes.
My person's back there in that OR room. And, so they're like, can we call your mom? Can we call your sister? And at that moment, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want it to bring anybody else
Mhm.
into that feeling. And, I'm trying to be strong and I'm trying to figure that out because they're about to tell me that he's fine and never mind, wrong patient.
Mhm.
It's amazing what goes through your mind in just those seconds. But the doctor came out and talked with me and, they never even were able to do the procedure. His heart stopped before they could even start. And they let me know that they were doing active CPR. And again, as a nurse, the average of CPR is 20 minutes.
Mhm.
And they'd already been going 20 minutes. And so I was already preparing myself that I'm going to have to tell our children
Mhm.
that dad didn't make it. I was already trying to figure out how to move on, how to move forward, how to plan all these things and what happened to all the plans that he and I were supposed to have. And 45 minutes, my husband was down. 45 minutes. And somehow I was able to convince the surgical team that I needed to be back there. Take me back to the OR. I'm a trauma nurse. I can handle this. And I don't know if they thought they were taking me back to say goodbye. I don't know that any of us really knew what we were doing, but they put me in a wheelchair. They wheeled me into that OR. And as soon as that door opened, I saw my husband's lifeless body laying on the OR table. And I just remember that door opening and I just yell his name as loud as I can. I'm Kevin. And I just started hollering and they wheeled me closer and they had a C-collar around him. And so one nurse was pulling that back so they could get me as close to his ear as possible. And I just started telling him our children's names. We have 7 children, so it's a long list. And I was talking about our children and I was talking about our life. And I said, this isn't how it ends, Kevin. This is not how it's going to end. You've got to come back to me. Please, Kevin, you've got to hear me. You've got to come back to me. And within those seconds of me pleading to God and pleading to my husband that this is not how our story ends, my husband's heart started beating again. And immediately there was commotion and action and they wheeled me back out of the room. And it was like, wait, what just happened? What just happened in that space? And they told me that was the only time that they were able to regain his heartbeat for any given time. And he was admitted to the ICU. Of course, he was on a ventilator. So I'm in my mind thinking, that's it. Like, we're going to get to go home. We're fine. This was just kind of some weird thing. And then meeting with a team of doctors again while he was in the ICU, just realizing, Natalie, he was down for a long time. We don't know if he'll regain consciousness. If he does, he might need months of rehab. I mean, he could have organ failure. His kidneys might have failed. We don't know the impact to his brain. And so we don't even understand what happened. And so I was having to make just decision after decision of, do they take him back to get a CT scan to see if he had a clot? Is that what happened? We were trying to figure out what happened and then what damage. But we went on a Friday morning, and through the roller coaster of the next few days, we started to wean him off of the ventilator on Sunday and to see just what was left of my husband. And they warned me he may not recognize you. He may not be able to speak. And I had told them, just be real with me. Don't sugarcoat this. Just tell me what it is that I'm facing. But Susan, my husband, woke up. He said my name. He recognized that he was in a hospital. I had to fill in a few blanks. And then for the next couple days, it was a lot of reminding him what had happened. He had no memory of us going to the hospital or why he was there. So I'd have to keep reminding him of that. But he walked out of that hospital in less than 1 week.
Wow. Walked out of the hospital.
He asked me to go home, get his boots. I got his boots. He put his boots on, his jeans, and he literally walked out of that hospital and back home to our family in less than a week after dying.
After dying. And Natalie, I mean, it's crazy. It's nothing but God.
Nothing but God.
Nothing but God. And they wheeled you in that room. You started hollering out his name and all the children's name and saying, "Don't leave me," praying to God. And his heart started beating. But that was after did they stop doing CPR after 25 minutes, or did they ever stop doing CPR?
They never stopped. And I think that's a miracle in and of itself that they did not quit. They attached him to a machine. It's called a Lucas machine. And that machine was doing the CPR for the surgical team, because after, just a couple minutes of CPR, you're exhausted. And so who knows how many different people had done the CPR, but I don't remember active CPR happening when they took me into the room.
Okay, so you don't know how long was CPR being done for 45 minutes?
That's what they said.
For 45 minutes. So when you were in the room, he was on that machine.
I believe so.
Okay. Natalie.
A miracle.
What a miracle.
And my husband today has no residual. He says he has some memory problems. We'll blame that situation.
Yes.
But I think he just naturally is going to forget a few things, like the laundry list of things that I gave him, honeydew list from yesterday.
Yeah.
He might be forgetting those. No, but no, really, truly no residual effects. He navigated a few strokes, and that what they thought was just the lack of oxygen to the brain during that time. It could have caused a few mini strokes.
Okay.
And we didn't experience the residual effects of that until last year. And so it's not been clear sail, but it has been unbelievable considering what it could have been. And I mean, even to this day, you would meet my husband and you would not know anything like this had occurred.
That is so amazing, and nothing you can point to but God.
Absolutely.
Nothing you can point to.
There's no other reason. We were meeting with doctors and trying to get answers and get clarification and each of them said, "We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what happened."
I'm telling you, walking miracle for both of you. I mean, both of you. And for you, I didn't realize because, for the National Day of Prayer,
yes,
we heard you tell the story because Steve and I were there. And then what you didn't tell that day is the condition you were in. You were on the floor.
Oh.
They had to put you in a wheelchair, and how you convinced them to take you back, which is a miracle within itself.
Absolutely.
They don't do that.
They don't do that.
No, they don't do that. And so that whole story, how that happened too, is also a miracle, getting you back there.
Right.
Just listening intently to that, like God orchestrated that piece because this, God uses himself, his word, and his people. He orchestrated all of that.
Yes.
That piece, and that his timing was just miraculous.
Yes.
I mean, did you call him Lazarus?
He's been nicknamed the Miracle Man. Definitely that. It's really fun to listen to. Our son is 8 and him tell the story of, remember that time Dad died? And people are, listening going, what is he talking about?
Remember that time?
Remember that time? It's been incredible to hear the medical staff that witnessed that miracle. And we had a nurse specifically who was with us in the surgery prep room. And afterwards, he let us know, I have not prayed to God in years. And that relationship's been a little bit rocky. But he let us know that I prayed for your husband, and this has changed my relationship with God. And just that story alone would have been enough.
Yeah.
But Susan, we heard story after story of what this did for people's faith, and even within our own family and our own children and their faith. And, you hate for something like this to need to occur, but when it does, it can't be wasted.
No, it cannot be wasted. It cannot be wasted. I am so grateful that you shared the story with us, because many, many listeners will hear it. God works in so many ways, and it is a true miracle, because so many people say, well, that was in the Old Testament. That was in the New Testament. I mean, God doesn't work miracles anymore in today, but God does work miracles. And God works miracles in ways where, in your story, it was so abundantly clear, overt, immediate, come back to life miracle. You say, when you say, God, speak through me, and, love this person because I can't, he works miracles that way too, where he completely changes your mindset. He works miracles. He works miracles in life and death situations as well.
That's right.
But God is still in the miracle working business.
He sure is.
And this is overtly one that happened in your life, and you shared it with us. And it was an intimate thing that you were willing to share, because it cannot be wasted. You're right.
That's right.
And God wastes nothing. And I'm sure that y'all have been living testimony. And this is proof of it by sharing it on the podcast. So, and I love that you shared what the nurse said, because it was powerful enough for him to come back to you and say, I wasn't in a good place with Jesus, and this helped me in my relationship with the Lord. And I haven't prayed in a long time.
And we're strangers. I mean, we were strangers. We didn't necessarily mean anything to him,
right?
But he cared enough about our lives that he would rectify his relationship with Jesus and pray after whatever he's been going through in his own life. And I thought, how selfless.
Yes.
And, but how powerful that God used this to bring him back to him.
Yeah.
And, all we've ever asked is that God be glorified through this situation.
Yes. And he is. That was only God. That's something only God could have done. So he is the one that's glorified through it, but you're willing to share it. So I so appreciate that. It reminds me of a story in Scripture. It reminds me of Bartimaeus, Bartimaeus, the blind man, and asking Jesus, hollering out when Jesus comes by, and Son of David, son of David, and everybody was trying to shush him. But Jesus said, who was that? So then they bring Bartimaeus to Jesus, and Jesus goes, what would you have me do for you? And it always blows my mind, because what a rhetorical question, because Jesus knew what he needed, but he wants us to ask. And then he said, I want my sight. And Erwin McManus is such a wordsmith. He's the lead pastor at Mosaic. And he said, we so many times ask what man can do, So Bartimaeus didn't ask for a seeing eye dog, which man can provide, or a cane, which man can provide, but he asked for his sight. And that's what only God can do. And it was a miracle.
That's right.
He gave him his eyesight back. And God provided a miracle for you. And he did what only he could do, not what man could do.
Amen.
So that's miracle territory right there. So thank you so much for sharing your story of faith. And thank you, God.
Thank you, God. Yes. Thank you for allowing us to share this story with our listeners.
We love you, Natalie. And we're so grateful for your family.
Yes.
Yes. That's great. Thanks, listeners. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Tangible Truth Podcast, part of the KLRC Podcast Network.